Whispers under the bed. They're not just in your head. They're hiding under your bed. And tonight, they're calling out to you. The night air clung to the bedroom like a damp sheet. David Thompson stood in the doorway, his silhouette sharp against the hallway light, hands on his hips. Michael sat cross-legged on his bed, knees pulled to his chest, the glow of a nightlight casting long, trembling shadows across the walls. "Whispers, Dad," Michael whispered, voice fraying at the edges. "They're under the bed. Or in the walls. I can't tell." David stepped inside, the floorboard creaking under his weight. He knelt beside the bed, fingers brushing the edge of the mattress. "You're overheating," he said, patting the boy's forehead. "It's the new furnace. Or the wind. You've been watching too many cartoons." Michael's eyes widened. "It's not cartoons. They sound like me, but wrong. Like when you record your voice and it sounds like a monster." David straightened, scanning the room. The clock on the nightstand ticked. A tree branch tapped the window pane. Rational, mundane. He'd fixed the loose shutter last week. It should have stopped. But here it was again. Tap, tap, tap. A metronome of ordinary noise. "Your brain plays tricks," David said, voice firm. He pulled back the bedskirt, flashlight beams sweeping the dust bunnies beneath. "See? Just the house settling." Michael didn't move. What if the house isn't settling? David's jaw tightened. He'd spent years teaching his son to question, to seek logic, not to fear the dark. Now the boy's insistence felt like a betrayal of that lesson. "You're safe," he snapped, sharper than intended. "I'm here. Do you think I'd let anything happen to you?" The boy flinched. David exhaled, forcing calm into his voice. "Look, the neighbor's dog barks at 2 a.m. The AC hums. Your imagination stitches it together into a story. That's all." He tugged the blanket over Michael's legs, the fabric crisp with starch. "You're 8. You're supposed to believe in monsters. But I don't." Michael's fingers dug into the bedspread. "Then why won't you check the closet?" David turned to the wardrobe, its double doors slightly ajar. He yanked them open. Empty hangers, a few folded sweaters. Satisfied? A beat. Michael stared at the space between the doors, as if waiting for something to step out. David followed his gaze. Nothing. Just the mundane geometry of wood and shadow. He turned back, hands on his hips. "You want me to sleep in here? Fine. But no more whispers. They're not real." Michael nodded, but his knuckles stayed white on the blanket. David hesitated, then patted his shoulder. "You're smart, Mike. You'll figure it out." As he left, the hallway light clicked off behind him. For a moment, the house held its breath. Then, from the darkened bedroom, a faint shh, like static or a voice pressed through fabric. David paused, frowned. The furnace, he told himself. Just the goddamn furnace. He didn't look back. The oak dining table, polished to a dull sheen under the flickering LED pendant light, divided them like a fault line. David Thompson stabbed his fork into a congealed mound of mashed potatoes, the clatter of silverware too loud in the hollow quiet of the suburban kitchen. Outside, the manicured lawn glowed under streetlights, perfect, unthreatening. Inside, the air tasted like static. "He's 10, Sarah," David said, voice tight as he pushed the plate away. "Kids invent monsters under the bed. It's developmentally normal." His knuckles whitened around the edge of the table, the wood grain pressing into his palm like a secret. Sarah leaned forward, her elbow brushing the half-empty wineglass. A bead of Cabernet clung to the rim, trembling. "He's been sleepwalking for 3 weeks. Last night he woke up outside the front door, David. In the rain." Her voice didn't rise, but the words carved into the space between them. "You think a developmental phase explains that?" David snorted. "Faulty lock. I'll fix it tomorrow." The lie tasted like dust. The lock was fine. He checked. He says the thing mimics his voice. Sarah's fingers curled around her glass, not drinking. He heard it calling from the closet while he was in the closet. Acoustics. Old pipes. David stood abruptly, chair legs screeching. The house groaned in response. A low creak from the attic, the kind that always followed rain. He froze, jaw clenched. Just the house settling. Sarah didn't flinch. You're so busy being the rational one, you won't even look. She gestured to the hallway where Michael's room sat dark and silent. What if he's right? David turned, hands braced on the counter. The stainless steel reflected his face, too sharp, too tense. You're feeding his paranoia. There's nothing there. But his throat tightened. Last night, he'd heard it too. A whisper, almost his own, from the empty hallway. Rational. It was the wind. The pendant light buzzed, casting long, wavering shadows across the table. Sarah's shadow stretched toward him, elongated, wrong. You think I want to believe this? She pushed her chair back, the legs scraping like fingernails. I want to fix it, but you won't even admit something's off. David caught his reflection in the microwave door. A man with tired eyes and a too-straight tie, clinging to the fiction that reality was a puzzle with a single solution. The house exhaled. A floorboard shifted upstairs. Just the cat. But they didn't have a cat. Fine. His voice was raw. Call the exorcist. The sarcasm curdled in his mouth. Sarah didn't smile. I'm calling a therapist tomorrow. She stood, her shadow swallowing his whole. You'll come with me. David turned back to the sink, hands shaking. The faucet dripped. Plink, plink, plink. A metronome counting down to something he couldn't name. The water ran clear, but the drain gurgled like it was choking. He didn't look at her as she left the room. Didn't see the way the light dimmed when she passed, or how the shadows pooled in the hallway, thick and waiting. Outside, the streetlights flickered. Just a power surge. Everything can be explained, he told himself, but the words felt thin, flimsy as the wallpaper in Michael's room, the kind that peeled at the edges, revealing nothing beneath but more wall. The table stood empty now, a battlefield with no winners. The question hung, unspoken, in the space where their love used to live. What if the rational world is the lie? David stared at the drain. It was still gurgling. David pulled the blanket taut over Michael's small frame, the fabric crackling like static. The boy's room smelled of lavender detergent and the faint metallic tang of the nightlight Sarah had insisted on. Rational, David told himself. Just a nightlight, just a draft. He lowered himself onto the edge of the twin bed, its springs groaning under his weight, a sound too loud in the suffocating quiet. Michael's eyes, wide and glassy, tracked him from the pillow. It's here, Dad, he whispered. David forced a laugh, the kind meant to shatter fear into absurdity. It's a house, Mikey. Creaks, breezes, physics. But the word felt hollow as it left his mouth, a flimsy shield against the way the shadows in the corner seemed to thicken when he looked away. He switched off the light. Moonlight sliced through the blinds, casting prison bar stripes across the floor. A toy soldier, knocked over earlier, lay in one of the shadows. Too still, David realized. He'd kicked it under the bed. Now it stood upright, its plastic face gleaming with unnatural precision. Wind, draft, something. His pulse thrummed in his ears, loud enough to drown out the hum of the fridge downstairs. He counted the seconds between breaths, anchoring himself to the rhythm of his own body. Control, logic, proof. Then the whisper. Not from the window, not from the vent. It slithered from the space between the bed and the wall. A sound like his own voice, distorted, repeating, Daddy. in a cadence that wasn't his. Michael stirred but didn't wake. David froze, his hand hovering over the boy's shoulder. The bed shifted beneath him, the mattress sinking as if something had settled into the hollow beside his hip. Just the springs, just the weight. But the pressure was there, deliberate, a weight that didn't match his own. He glanced at the ceiling, searching for cracks, for reasons, and saw the shadow of the mobile, the one Sarah had hung years ago, spinning slowly. There was no breeze. His throat tightened. The bed, once a fortress of ordinary comfort, now felt like a trap. He'd promised safety, but safety required belief, and belief was the one thing he'd spent decades refusing to give. The whisper came again, closer this time, curling around his ear like cold breath. "Prove it's nothing," it seemed to say. "Prove it's nothing while it's right here." David didn't move. He stared at the ceiling, counting the minutes until dawn, his hand hovering, useless, above his son's sleeping form. The bed held them both, silent and waiting, as the line between protector and prey blurred into the dark. The house exhaled. David froze mid-step, the hallway light casting long, familiar shadows. A draft, cold, deliberate, coiled around his ankles, though the thermostat read 72. He dismissed it as faulty vents. Rational. Always rational. He entered Michael's room, the scent of lavender detergent clinging to the sheets. The bed, a fortress of stuffed animals and mismatched pillows, looked untouched. Yet the air above it shimmered, as if the space itself resisted stillness. A rustle, soft, rhythmic, slithered from beneath the frame. Wind through loose siding, he told himself, kneeling. His fingers brushed the carpet, cool and undisturbed. No gaps, no rodents. Then the sound shifted. A wet, papery whisper, like pages turning in a flooded book. David's breath hitched. He gripped the bedpost, knuckles white. Just the house settling, old homes creak. But the rhythm was wrong, too steady, too listening. He yanked the bed skirt aside. Empty space, dust bunnies. The void stared back, smelling faintly of ozone. A shadow flickered in the corner. Not the swing of a curtain, but a shape, shifting, with no source. David's pulse thudded in his ears. He reached for his phone, the screen's glow a lifeline. Check the security cam, prove it's nothing. But the feed showed only the room's sterile calm, the bed a silent accusation. The cold deepened, his skin prickled. Something breathed under the bed. Not air, but a low vibration, like a hummed note in a sealed room. Rationality frayed. It's sleep deprivation, stress. But the logic felt flimsy, a frayed rope over a chasm. He stared at the bed's edge, where the carpet met the frame. A single dark hair lay there, too thick for Michael's, too coarse for his own. He leaned closer. The whispering surged. A flicker of movement, a smudge of shadow detaching from the void. David recoiled, heart hammering. The bed, once mundane, now loomed as a threshold. The ordinary had curdled, its edges blurred by something studying him. His hand trembled as he pulled the bedskirt taut, sealing the darkness. But the silence that followed was worse. The house held its breath. David stood, back to the wall, the rational world he'd built cracking like drywall. The draft curled around him again, this time carrying a scent, damp earth and something sweetly metallic. Impossible. His breath fogged the air, though the room was warm. He glanced at the security feed again, the bed's shadow now stretched toward the camera, impossibly long. For the first time, doubt felt like a living thing. The bed wasn't just furniture. It was a mouth, and it had been waiting. His hand hovered over the phone. Call Sarah? No, she'd think he'd broken. The rational explanation was gone, buried under the weight of the unexplainable. The house, once safe, now hummed with a truth he couldn't name. Outside, an owl cried. The sound morphed into a child's sigh. David's knees buckled. The bed shuddered, not from wind, from hunger. He pressed his palm to the mattress. It felt warm, alive. The last thread of certainty snapped. The house exhaled again. This time, it sounded like laughter. David's fingers brushed the cold metal of the door handle, his breath hitching as he pushed Michael's bedroom door open. Dawn seeped through the blinds, striping the room in clinical light. Just wind, he told himself, or the oak branch scraping the window. The creaks, the whispers, all physics, not phantoms. But his palms were slick. He'd told Sarah it was stress, the boy's overactive imagination. Yet last night, the floorboard outside his own room had groaned under a weight that wasn't his. He stepped inside, eyes scanning the familiar. Superhero posters, abandoned Legos, the unmade bed. The bed. It sat slightly crooked, the mattress indented as if someone had been sitting there too long. David knelt, running a hand over the sheets. No dampness, no warmth, just the faint smell of laundry detergent and something else. Ozone, maybe? Static, power surge. He straightened, forcing a scoff. You're a civil engineer. You solve problems with logic, not fairy tales. But the indentation, too deep for a child's frame, too precise. He'd measured the room last night. The gap between the bed and the wall was exactly 2 inches. Now it was 3. He pulled out his phone, snapping a photo. Documentation. Proof it's normal. His thumb hovered over the settings. Geotagging on, timestamp verified. A rational man leaves no room for doubt. He crouched again, tracing the edge of the mattress. A single, hair-thin scratch marred the wood beneath. Not from furniture. Too uniform. Like a blade, but clean. Nail polish remover? A tool? His pulse spiked. You're inventing monsters. He pulled his tape measure from his pocket, always carried for work, and measured the scratch. 4.7 centimeters. Precise. Deliberate. The window. He strode over, yanking up the sash. The oak branch was swaying, but it stopped short of the glass. He'd tied it back with twine last week. So why does the wind sound like whispering? He pressed his ear to the pane. Silence. Just the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Normal, suburban, safe. But the bed, it haunted him. That indentation. The way the sheets were pulled taut on one side, as if someone had lain there, watching. He'd slept through it, failed to protect. His stomach twisted. Denial is a shield, he thought. But what if the truth is the thing that breaks you? He snapped another photo, this time of the scratch. His hands didn't shake. They couldn't. He opened the closet, scanning for loose wires, hidden speakers, pranks, hoaxes, anything. Nothing. Just Michael's raincoat and a deflated soccer ball. Back at the bed, he hesitated, leaned down. The mattress yielded under his weight, springing back with a faint whoomp. Just foam, just physics. But for a second, the air felt thick, charged, like before a storm. He jerked upright. Your mind's a broken sensor, David. Recalibrate. He pulled out his notebook. Scratch, 4.7 centimeters. Bed displacement, 1 inch. No external cause. The words felt flimsy. He'd built bridges, calculated load limits, trusted the numbers. But numbers didn't explain the absence of footprints on the dust-free floor, didn't explain why the space under the bed felt occupied. A car alarm blared outside. David flinched, heart hammering. Rational, mundane, safe. But the bed's shadow on the wall seemed to shift as he turned to leave. Just a trick of the light, he told himself. Still, he glanced back. The sheets lay smooth, unbroken, waiting. He shut the door behind him, locking it. For safety, he lied. The key felt heavy in his pocket. Denial was a wall, but walls could crack. And what if the truth wasn't on the other side? What if it was already here, breathing in the walls, learning? He walked to the kitchen, hands steady, poured coffee. The mug trembled. Just the caffeine, just the fear, just the bed, waiting for him to stop pretending. David's fingers traced the edge of the property deed, the paper's brittle corners biting into his thumb. The attic light flickered. A faulty bulb, he told himself. Not the thing Michael had described slithering through the vents. Below, the house hummed with ordinary sounds. The fridge's low thrum, the creak of floorboards as Sarah moved through the kitchen. Normal. All normal. He unfolded the yellowed pages. 1987, structural repairs. 1993, water damage. Routine, but the next line snagged his eye. 1999, unexplained structural shifts. Owner relocated. His pulse ticked up. Shifts. He dismissed Michael's claims of walls breathing as childhood imagination. But this was ink on paper, a trace of something unseen. He flipped faster. A 2005 letter from a previous tenant. The house listens. Laughter escaped him, sharp and hollow. Paranoid scribbles, he muttered, but the words clung like cobwebs. A draft snaked through the attic, rustling the documents. David froze. The window was shut. Wind, just wind. He forced his breath steady, gripping the folder tighter. The next page held a photograph. The house, decades younger, its windows dark. In the corner of the frame, a shadow pooled unnaturally, too thick, too still. His throat tightened. Trick of the light, he whispered, but the phrase tasted thin, brittle as the paper. He remembered Michael's wide eyes last night. It copies us, Dad. Now, the house seemed to lean in, its silence pressing against his eardrums. He scanned the deeds again, searching for logic, for cause, but the dates blurred. 1987, 1999, 2005. A pattern? Or his mind stitching coincidence into conspiracy? The attic stairs groaned. Sarah's voice floated up. Find anything? Just old paperwork, he called back, shoving the documents into a box. But the shadow in the photo lingered in his vision. A smear of ink? Or a mouth? His hands shook as he climbed down, the ordinary creak of the stairs suddenly sinister. In the kitchen, Sarah handed him coffee, her smile warm. Michael's asking for you. David nodded, but his gaze snagged on the window. Outside, the suburban street was perfect. Manicured lawns, a parked minivan, the neighbor's dog barking. Normal. Yet the air felt charged, as if the world had been rewound to a frame just before the crack. He sipped his coffee, the bitterness sharp on his tongue. How many times had he told Michael, "It's all in your head"? Now, the house seemed to echo back. What if it's in yours? He set the mug down. The question hung, unspoken, between the rational and the real. David's footsteps echoed too loud in the dead silence of the hallway. He'd just tucked Michael in, his voice steady as he'd whispered, "No monsters, buddy. Just shadows." Now, the words bounced back from the empty master bedroom. "No monsters, buddy. Just shadows." He froze. The house's usual hum, refrigerator thrum, wind in the eaves, had vanished. Only his own voice, crisp and wrong, filled the void. Rational. Electrical glitch. The kid's recorder left on. He forced a laugh, loud enough to shatter the tension. "Very funny, Michael." Silence. Then, "Very funny, Michael." The echo wasn't behind him. It seeped from the walls, the floorboards, the inside of his skull. The words warped on the second syllable, like a tape played at half speed. David lunged for the light switch. The hallway blazed white, but the shadow of his outstretched hand didn't move with him. It lingered, stretching toward the bedroom door. He choked back a curse and shouted, Show yourself! Show yourself! The mimicry was flawless, his timbre, his panic, but the voice added a wet, clicking breath between syllables, like something gnawing on the vowels. He backed toward the stairs, heart hammering. Just stress, sleep deprivation, the neighbor's TV. But then the entity spoke before he did. Sarah's going to leave you. His blood turned to ice. He'd never said that aloud, never thought it. David bolted for the kitchen, slamming the door behind him. His breath came in ragged gasps as he yanked open cabinets, searching for a knife, a phone, anything. The fluorescent light flickered. When it steadied, his reflection in the microwave glass wasn't his. The face tilted its head, mouth moving in sync with a whisper he didn't make. You don't know what's real. He grabbed the knife and spun, slashing at the air. The blade met nothing, but the silence that followed was worse. His own voice, now from the ceiling, cooed, "Daddy's scared." The words slithered down his spine. Rationality, the bedrock of his life, crumbled. If his voice could lie, what else had? The house? His son's nightmares? Himself? A child's laughter echoed from upstairs. Michael's laugh. But David had locked the boy's door. He dropped the knife. It clattered against the tile, the sound stretching into a distorted scream. The lights died. In the black, the mimic breathed his name, not as a question, but as a promise. The last thing he heard, as the walls pulsed like a living throat, was his own voice, whispering the words he'd used to soothe Michael 1,000 times. It's all in your head. The dinner table gleamed under the harsh kitchen light, a perfect circle of mahogany, where the Thompson family once shared laughter. Now, it was a battlefield. David's fingers hovered over his tablet, the screen casting a cold glow on his jaw. On the table, a half-eaten plate of meatloaf, a glass of milk untouched, and a digital recorder looping static. "Michael, eat your peas," Sarah said, her voice tight. Her son stared at his plate, shoulders hunched. David didn't look up. "The audio's clearer at 2:17 a.m., he muttered, rewinding the recorder. "The vibration pattern matches the ceiling cracks." "David," Sarah's fork clattered against porcelain. "He's talking about the thing in his closet, not cracks." Michael's eyes darted to the hallway. "It copies me, Dad, when I blink." Subsonic resonance from the construction site, David cut in, tapping the tablet. The screen flickered, a shadow stretching too long on the kitchen wall, then vanishing. He froze. Glare, just glare. He adjusted the recorder's gain. "We'll calibrate the decibel meter after dinner." Sarah's chair scraped back. "There is no dinner for you, David. You're not here." He finally looked up. The table was empty except for his equipment. Michael's chair was gone. Sarah stood by the sink, arms crossed. The clock ticked, a sound that didn't match the rhythm of the house. "Prove it's not real," Michael whispered from the doorway, clutching a stuffed rabbit. David's throat tightened. The recorder hissed. A breath? No. Wind through the vents. He forced a smile. "It's called pareidolia, son. Your brain fills silence with noise." But his hands trembled as he replayed the audio. A child's laugh, then a pause, too precise to be random. He zoomed in. The waveform spiked in perfect sync with Michael's bedtime routine. Coincidence. Always coincidence. Sarah led Michael away, their footsteps muffled. Wrong, as if the floorboards swallowed the sound. David stayed, staring at the empty chairs. The meatloaf congealed. The recorder looped. Static. A whisper. Static. He opened the basement door. The stairs groaned. Not settling. Not settling. His pulse hammered in his ears. The truth was there, just beyond the data. He needed one more measurement, one more proof. The table remained behind him, a monument to what he'd sacrificed. Somewhere, a child's laugh echoed, not from the recorder. David didn't turn around. He never did. The fluorescent hum of the desk lamp sliced through the twilight, casting long, trembling shadows across David's maps and notes. Sarah stood in the doorway, her fingers white-knuckled around the edge of the frame. The house smelled of dust and stale coffee. A normal suburban stillness, except the air itself seemed to vibrate, as if the walls were holding their breath. "You're not sleeping again." Her voice was soft, but it cracked like thin ice. David didn't look up. Pens scattered the floor, pages marked with frantic circles around the impossible. Michael's room, 2:17 a.m. No footprints in dust. "I'm close," he muttered. "The draft explanation doesn't add up. Thermal currents can't—" "It's not the draft." She stepped inside, the floorboard groaning beneath her. "Last night, I heard Michael call my name. Clear as this lamp. But he was asleep. I checked." David froze. A muscle twitched in his jaw. "You were tired. Sleep paralysis. It's documented." "No." She moved closer, the scent of lavender soap clashing with the metallic tang of his obsession. It was his voice, but slower, like an echo. The word hung. The lamp flickered. For a heartbeat, the shadow behind David stretched too far. Wrong. Then snapped back. "Echoes don't originate inside a closed room," David snapped, but his hand wavered over a photo of Michael. The boy's smile in the frame seemed to shift, eyes wider than he remembered. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "You're not listening. It's happening to me, too." "Rational," he barked, spinning to face her. His pupils were dilated, veins pulsing at his temples. "It's stress, grief, your mind filling gaps with what you fear." "But what if the fear is real?" Her hand brushed his arm. He flinched. "You think I want to believe this? I just want to protect him." A sound sliced the silence. A child's sigh, muffled from the hallway. David's breath hitched. Sarah's eyes widened. "See?" She reached for him. "It's not just Michael. It's us. It's learning how to—" "No!" He wrenched away, knocking over the lamp. The room plunged into darkness. In the black, the sigh repeated, closer now. Her voice this time. "David, help me." He staggered back, heart hammering. The replica was flawless. Sarah's tears glinted in the faint streetlight. "You can't explain this away. Not anymore." The mimic's voice coiled around them, a perfect echo of her plea. "Not anymore." David's denial choked in his throat. His hands, once steady, methodical, shook as he fumbled for the light switch. The bulb flared to life, revealing only the empty hall. But the air still vibrated. Sarah's hope curdled into despair as he turned away, fingers gripping the desk. Coincidence. Auditory hallucination. She didn't move. The mimic's echo lingered in the walls, in the space between them. The question wasn't spoken, but it filled the room. If reality bends, who do we trust? David's knuckles turned white. Somewhere deep, a part of him knew. But the lie was safer. "Go to bed, Sarah," he said, staring at the maps. At the impossible. As she left, the house sighed. The echo followed her down the hall. David's fingers trembled as he adjusted the last camera, its red light blinking like a pulse. The suburban house, beige walls, creaky floorboards, the faint scent of lemon polish, felt suffocatingly ordinary. Just data, he told himself. Proof for Michael. Nothing more. He dismissed the boy's whispers. "It copies you, Dad," as nightmares. But the raw fear in Michael's eyes last night had been too sharp to ignore. Now, the digital recorder on the dining table hummed, a promise of rationality in a world that refused to play by the rules. He reviewed the footage, empty hallways, the flicker of a light bulb. Normal. Good. He rewound, played it again. A shadow at the edge of the frame. Just the tree outside. But when he zoomed in, the shadow twitched. Not the wind. It moved like a thing with intent. The recorder beeped. David froze. The audio feed showed his own voice, calm, methodical. Testing. 10 seconds. Then, a pause. A new sound. A whisper, mimicking his tone. Testing. 10 seconds. He checked the room. No one there. His stomach dropped. Feedback. A glitch. He replayed it. The mimic's voice was smoother, more precise, as if it had learned from the first take. By midnight, the recording spiraled. The entity now replicated his gestures, the way he rubbed his temple when stressed, the nervous tap of his fingers. It wasn't just sound, it was him, but wrong. A frame showed the shadow standing exactly where he'd been an hour prior, posture identical, except the head tilted too far to the left. The recorder's screen glowed. David stared at the timestamp, 3:07 a.m. His own voice echoed from the speakers, but the words were wrong. "You can't prove me away." He lunged to stop it. The device shut off. Silence. Then from the hallway, the click of the recorder powering on again. He backed toward the door, heart hammering. The walls seemed to breathe, the familiar wallpaper curling like old skin. The recorder played once more, his voice, but layered with a wet, guttural crackle. "You're already wrong." David grabbed the device, fingers slipping on the cold plastic. The screen flickered. For a split second he saw it, a face in the grainy footage, a reflection of his own, but with eyes too wide, mouth stretched in a smile that didn't belong to him. He dropped the recorder. It hit the floor unbroken. The screen stayed dark. Then slowly, the red light blinked back on. Click. Michael's breath hitched as the floorboard groaned outside his room. Again. He clutched his blanket, the familiar creak of the suburban house now a predator's whisper. "Dad?" His voice cracked. The door swung open. David stood there, bathrobe sagging, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. "Just the wind, buddy," he said, but his eyes darted to the hallway, too fast. Michael's shoulders relaxed, until he saw it. Dad's shadow stretching down the hall, behind them, moving toward the stairs. Two Davids. One in the doorway, one gliding through the moonlit corridor, silent as smoke. Michael's mouth went dry. The David in the hall turned, and the red glow of the security camera's standby light flickered across his cheek. Wrong. Dad never left that camera on. The real David followed his gaze, face paling. "It's a trick of the light," he insisted, but his knuckles whitened on the flashlight. "Your mind's playing games." But the hallway David didn't blink, didn't breathe. His smile stretched too wide, mirroring Dad's earlier grin with a stiffness that made Michael's stomach lurch. The red light pulsed. Michael remembered the night he'd begged Dad to check under the bed. "Ghosts aren't real," Dad had said, "but I'll look anyway." Now, the man in the hallway tilted his head, just like the mimic, and took a step closer. The David in the doorway flinched. Which one would check under the bed? The question burned. Michael's trust splintered. The red light flared, and the hallway David's eyes glinted. Black. Empty. Dad's flashlight trembled. "It's not real," he whispered, but his voice cracked like a kid's. The hallway David raised a hand. Dad's hand. But the knuckles were too sharp, the skin too smooth. The red light caught the edge of his sleeve, a stain Mom had scrubbed out yesterday. Michael screamed. Dad lunged forward, but the hallway David vanished. The camera's red light died. Alone in the sudden silence, Michael stared at the empty hall. Dad's breath was ragged. "See? Just shadows." But his eyes kept darting to the dark corner where the red light had burned. The blanket slipped from Michael's fingers. The house felt different now. Watched. Who could he trust? The red light stayed off, but the doubt, like the mimic, had already moved in. The front door groaned as David shoved Sarah and Michael toward the car, his voice a blade slicing through the night's stillness. "Go! Now!" Sarah's knuckles whitened on the suitcase handle, her eyes darting between the house's darkened windows and David's rigid spine. Michael clung to her leg, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on his cheeks. "Dad, it's in the walls," he whispered, and David's jaw tightened. Rational. Always rational. Just shadows, just wind. "Get in the car," David barked, his hand gripping Michael's shoulder too hard. The boy flinched. Sarah's lips parted, a plea, a warning, but David cut her off. "I'll handle it. Trust me." The lie tasted like copper. Trust. He'd spent months dissecting creaks as settling foundations, whispers as faulty wiring. Now, the house breathed with them. He'd felt it, a pulse beneath the floorboards, a breath where there should be none. The car's engine sputtered to life. Sarah's face blurred through the windshield, her mouth forming silent words. "Don't stay." David turned away, locking eyes with the empty hallway. The mimicked click of the front door latch echoed behind him as it closed. Alone. The house exhaled. Light from the hallway fixture flickered, stretching David's shadow into a thing with too many joints. He stepped forward, his foot hovering at the threshold of the living room. The doorframe, a stark rectangle of white trim against the dark, was the last boundary between order and the other. Rational control. A child's nightmare. He'd crossed it to prove the divide existed. Now, the line blurred. A floorboard groaned. Not the house. Something groaned. David's breath hitched. He'd come to confront the entity, to rip its mask off and shout, "See, it's nothing!" But the air thickened, charged with the smell of ozone and wet earth. The walls rippled, just for a second, like a reflection in disturbed water. His pulse roared in his ears. "Explain it, now!" He reached for the light switch. It clicked. Nothing. The darkness felt deliberate, hungry. Then, a whisper. Not from the walls, from behind him. David spun. The hallway was empty, but the doorframe twitched, as if the wood itself were breathing. His hands shook. Rational. Rational. But the thought slithered in. What if reality is the mask? The mimicked sound of Michael's voice slithered from the basement. "Daddy?" David's knees locked. He wanted to run, to scream for Sarah. But he'd sent them away, to protect them, to prove he was right. The doorframe's edge warped, the white paint bleeding into something darker. The last rational thought, "This is impossible," shattered as the darkness stepped through the threshold. Not a shape, an absence. David backed into the wall, his heart a hammer against his ribs. The entity didn't move. It simply filled the space where the door should be, waiting, learning, replicating. His hand found the doorknob of the front door. Locked. He'd locked it, to keep them safe, to keep it in. The whisper came again, closer this time, wearing his own voice. "You can't protect them if you don't know what's real." David's breath came in ragged gasps. The doorframe loomed, a jagged mouth swallowing the light. He'd crossed the line to prove it existed. Now, the line was gone. He pressed his forehead against the cold wood of the front door. Outside, the world was safe. Inside, the house held its breath. What's more important? The darkness shifted. David's fingers tightened on the doorknob. He didn't know anymore. David's knuckles whitened around the flashlight as he yanked the bedframe upward. Dust motes swirled in the beam, catching on the frayed edge of Michael's blanket, the one he'd hidden under last night, whispering about the thing that breathes with you. The floorboards groaned, revealing the space beneath. Empty. Just as it should be. A chuckle escaped him, sharp and brittle. "See, Mike? No monsters, just—" The flashlight flickered. Not from the battery, from inside the darkness. A shape shifted. Not a shadow, too dense, too deliberate, coiling like smoke given weight. David's breath hitched. Rational, always rational. He dropped to his knees, flashlight thrust forward. The beam sliced through the gloom, illuminating a figure crouched where the bedpost shadow should have been. His own face stared back. Same chipped tooth, same scar above the eyebrow from Michael's first birthday. But the eyes, too wide, too still, locked onto his with a predator's patience. David's throat tightened. "You're not real." The mimic tilted its head. His head. A perfect mimicry of the gesture he'd made that morning, scolding Michael for leaving toys in the hallway. "Everything has an explanation," David growled, voice cracking. He lunged, grabbing the thing's wrist. It was cold. Too cold. The mimic didn't flinch. Instead, it mirrored his grip, fingers pressing into his skin with identical pressure. David jerked back, but the creature's hold didn't break. It pulled, yanking him closer until their faces were inches apart. "Stop it!" David roared, twisting. The mimic's lips parted. His lips. And out came his own voice, smooth as polished stone. "You're failing him." A jolt shot through David's chest. Sarah's words, verbatim, from last night's fight. He stumbled, knocking over Michael's toy truck. A plastic wheel skittered under the bed. The mimic didn't move. It watched, its chest rising in time with his own ragged breaths. No, impossible. He swung the flashlight like a club. The mimic dodged, fluid as water, and David's arms struck the bed frame. Pain flared. The mimic stepped forward, one hand rising to touch the bruise already blooming on David's temple. "How did it—" "Control is an illusion," the mimic whispered, his voice laced with Sarah's exhaustion. "You chose the lie. Now you see." The room tilted. The walls, his walls, painted in calm beige, seemed to pulse. The mimic's fingers traced the edge of the bed, where Michael's stuffed rabbit lay forgotten. The rabbit's button eyes glinted. Too many buttons. David's knees buckled. He caught himself on the mattress, fabric tearing under his palms. The mimic stood over him, not threatening. Waiting. "Prove it," David choked out, clinging to the last shreds of his logic. "Show me you're not— me." The mimic leaned down. Its breath smelled of the lemon polish Sarah used. "You already know," it murmured. "You've always known." A sound rose from the hallway, Michael's whimper. David turned. The mimic moved first, already crouching at the door, hand reaching for the knob. His hand. "No!" David scrambled after it, but his legs were lead. The mimic glanced back, eyes glinting with something ancient and hungry. Then it smiled. His smile. The bed groaned as it settled back into place, trapping David beneath. Dust rained down. Somewhere, a clock ticked. Too slow. He pressed his palms against the cold floor, staring up at the mattress's underside. The mimic's shadow stretched across it. His shadow, but wrong. Limbs elongating like taffy. Can you trust what you see? The question hung in the dark, thick as the dust in his lungs. Michael's cry faded. The house fell silent. David's fingers brushed something small and plastic under the bed. Michael's truck. He clutched it, knuckles white. Above him, the bed shuddered. The mimic was making itself at home. The front door clicked shut behind Sarah, Michael clinging to her leg like a vine. The house smelled of lemon polish and something else, stale, metallic. Then they saw them. Two David Thompsons stood by the kitchen island, identical in their wrinkled work shirts, identical in the way they held their coffee mugs. One's knuckles were white, the other's coffee was steaming. "Michael," both said at once. Sarah froze. Michael's breath hitched, his small fingers digging into her thigh. The Davids didn't blink. The one by the sink shifted his weight, left foot first, always left foot first. But the other mirrored it. A tick. A glitch in the script. "Prove it's you," Sarah demanded, voice brittle. The David stepped forward, One recited Michael's birthmark coordinates, the other the date of Sarah's car accident. Both knew the combination to the safe. Both flinched when Michael dropped his toy truck. David, the real one, felt his pulse hammer in his throat. Rationalize, find the flaw. He scanned the room, the family photos, the I Heart New York mug, the security camera mounted above the TV. Its red light blinked, steady as a heartbeat. It's broken. He'd fixed it 3 days ago. No power, no recording. He pointed, voice cracking. The camera's on. It shouldn't be. The other David didn't glance up. You're panicking. It's fine. But Sarah hesitated. The real David knew the camera's wiring, knew it was dead. The mimic, if it was a mimic, wouldn't care about a detail so mundane, so human. Michael sobbed. Daddy's scared! Both Davids turned. One knelt, hands open. The other stood rigid, sweat beading at his temples. Which one is me, David thought. The one who can't breathe, or the one who's too calm? The red light pulsed, unblinking, unforgiving. Sarah reached for the David who'd knelt. Michael shrank back. The air thickened. The walls breathed. David's rational mind, his last shield, splintered. If the camera was on, what else was broken? What else was wrong? The two Davids stared at each other. One's coffee cup trembled. The other's eyes flickered, not at the camera, but at the glare on its lens, where the red light cast a tiny, perfect circle on the wallpaper. A perfect replication. A perfect trap. The red light blinked. No one moved. The question hung, suffocating. If reality can be copied, what's left to trust? The red light of the security camera pulsed like a slow, arrhythmic heartbeat. David stood in the living room, sweat tracing cold paths down his temples. His son, Michael, crouched behind the sofa, eyes wide, fingers digging into the fabric. The other David, the one in the armchair, smiled with his mouth, but the eyes stayed flat, like a photograph of a man. You're not him, David said, voice cracking. You don't know him. The mimic tilted its head, mimicking the exact angle David used to read bedtime stories. I know he's afraid of the basement light. I know he hides his math test under the mattress. It leaned forward, palms open. I am him. Michael whimpered. The red light flared, casting long, distorted shadows. Sarah hovered near the kitchen doorway, her face a mask of forced calm. Rational, always rational. But the air tasted wrong, like static and burnt sugar. David's hands shook. He'd spent hours listing facts. I taught him to ride a bike. I know the scar on his knee. But the mimic parroted every detail with chilling precision. The truth coiled in his throat. What if I'm the fake? And the thought nearly choked him. Then Michael's voice cut through the static. Dad, your hands. David froze. The mimic's hands were clean, smooth. But his own, real hands bore the raw, split knuckle from yesterday's rage, when he'd punched the wall after Michael screamed about the thing in the closet. The mimic's smile faltered. Its fingers twitched, trying to replicate the wound. But the skin stayed unbroken, pristine. David didn't think. He dropped to his knees, ignoring the mimic's hiss of static, and pulled Michael into his arms. The boy's heartbeat thundered against his chest. Alive. Real. And David buried his face in Michael's hair, smelling shampoo and tears. I'm sorry, he rasped. I'm so sorry. The mimic's form wavered, its face stretched, pixels bleeding into the air. The red light strobed wildly. Click, 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 before dying out. In the sudden darkness, only Michael's sobs remained. Sarah stepped forward, her hand hovering over David's shoulder. No words, no proof, just the weight of her presence, warm and unsteady. The camera was dead. The basement light still hummed. But for the first time, David didn't need to explain it.